So today we're going to be looking at the Vive Ultimate Tracker, Vive's latest and hopefully greatest trackers. What are these trackers for? These trackers are built for those looking for a middle ground between the inertial measurement unit, or IMU-based trackers, and lighthouse-based trackers. Instead, what it does is it has you take a scan of your room and creates a map, then uses the two cameras that are on each of these trackers, here and here, and tries to tell where it is based on what it sees. And I guess along with it, it does have the IMU built in for further accuracy. So what it means in practicality is no or less drifting like with normal IMU-based trackers, and no need to have a clear line of sight with all of your trackers like with lighthouse-based tracking. To actually start, these little trackers are going to cost you about $600 for the initial package that comes with 3 trackers, and the stuff needed to either connect to your PC or the Vive XR Elite. Now if you want to buy more trackers, they are going to run you about another $200 each. Another caveat is that each wireless dongle only supports up to 5 trackers, so if you are planning on using more than that, you will need to spend about another $40 on a wireless dongle, plus $200 for however many more trackers you think you need. Another cost that will come up with is the cost of whatever you decide to mount your trackers to. Now I ended up purchasing the Rebuff Reality track straps for mine. Here is one of them now, which are going to be about $50 before taxes for all 3 for my 3 trackers that it came with, or that I bought. And my purchase also did come with the game Dance Dash, which I believe is one of the only rhythm games that are actually built specifically for the feet tracking, and it is a pretty great game to test the effectiveness of these trackers. I do have a little bit of gameplay here for Dance Dash. If you've ever played the game Dance Rush, you'll notice it's very similar. Essentially, it is the exact same game, except if you're using hand controllers, there'll also be little hand notes for you to hit as well. And my gameplay wasn't exactly the best, unfortunately, because I'm not really the best at dancing or like games. And I do have to be somewhat mindful of my downstairs neighbors since I do live in an apartment building and I'm not sure how much noise actually goes through the bottom of these floors. And getting the tracker onto the strap is pretty easy. All you do is slap it onto that piece of plastic, then you strap that baby on your leg like a snake monitor. And the only other probable cost is maybe buying a charging station for the trackers. I ended up buying a $50 charger that had multiple USB-C ports on it, so I can charge all the trackers at once, and I just got that straight off of Amazon. Though Vive does now sell an official charging station, which wasn't available when I initially got mine. And the trackers are supposed to have a 7-hour battery life, and personally I don't play VR nearly long enough for me to be able to confirm that, unfortunately, myself. I feel like 7 hours is way too long to spending in VR unless you are majorly into VR chat. So the battery life should last for any normal person, unfortunately. But my total price to get a good setup was about $700 before taxes when I bought these. Aside from that, the trackers were actually kind of annoying to get set up. You need plenty of light to actually get them to set up properly, since these are actually looking at your environment instead of only using internal tracking or being tracked by something else. Another thing is that it is highly recommended that you have stuff on or around your walls, like posters of furniture. If you have bare walls, then the cameras don't have anything to track, leading to either bad tracking quality or them being completely unable to track without constant tracking loss. I ended up buying a 1200 or so lumen light to light up my room, might have been a bit overkill, and I stuck a couple decorations up on my wall as well. After doing that, my tracking and ease of use went up immensely. As for the actual setup process, the trackers do require you to scan your room twice. It has you do this a lot, unfortunately, as well, which is kind of annoying, because you gotta scan your room twice, once on your knees, once standing up. And again, if your room isn't lit up or decorated, the trackers will constantly ask you to reset your trackers by standing up, holding the tracker to your chest, and pointing it towards your PC or wireless dongle, which is when I was initially setting them up. I ran into that issue constantly until I got the light and decorations up on the wall. After doing that, the trackers themselves ran a lot better when completely set up. The only other real setup is calibrating the trackers. It doesn't always ask you to do this when you're using them for the first time for the day, but even after doing the fixes and setup for the room, the tracker will try to sell you that they can't track when doing the calibration. But if you keep moving the controller and tracker, it has you kind of do it in a figure 8 motion, like it asks you to, it should eventually calibrate properly, allowing you to use them. Now, aside from the setup, these trackers do work pretty well once set up. They don't drop tracking too often, and when the leg tracking lost tracking, simply lifting up my legs was typically enough to get them tracking again, and they went right back to where they should be. Now, a little bit of context, this clip is from before when I had stuff up on my walls, so if your walls are bare, you might notice that your trackers do prefer looking at one side of your room, or just can only really track things at one side of your room or lose tracking more often when looking one direction. While using trackers, I personally didn't notice any drift. The only sort of resetting I had to do was where I was in VR chat and I had to realign the, tracker location with the model to make it more accurate. I think that's more on me than the trackers, because I did model I was using wasn't necessarily made for full body tracking, though I did try a couple other different models that worked better from what I could tell. And the people I was playing VR chat with did also say the tracking looked good. And considering the people I was playing with and just spoke to played a lot more than me, they would be able to spot that out a lot more easier. All in all, if you aren't sure whether or not you think IMU trackers will be accurate enough for you, or want to not have to worry about tracker drift, I would highly recommend the Vive Ultimate Trackers as an alternative. But as a replacement for the White House-based trackers, I can't really say unfortunately, as I haven't really tried any of them specifically. Though if given the chance, I still think that I would choose the Ultimate Trackers over IMU trackers, since they are realistically just as portable as the IMU trackers, while allowing for more accurate tracking due to the cameras on them. But against Lighthouse trackers, if you put tracking accuracy and the lack of tracking loss above all else, these trackers aren't completely there yet. But hopefully with some future software updates will allow for these trackers to temporarily use the built-in IMUs to take over when the cameras aren't working 100%. And if I'm going to give them a rating, I would say honestly 8 out of 10, with the main reasoning for it not being higher is that the setup time and occasional tracking loss does take a little bit away from the experience. And they are a tad more expensive than they should be, considering you can get something like the Sony Mokobi for $450, or a 6-pack of the Horror X trackers for $300. But otherwise, the ease of use, portability, lightweightness of the trackers, and long battery life, these should work perfectly fine for the casual VR chat user or virtual reality user. And on top of that, they do come from a more well-established brand in the VR industry. Hey, how's your experience with the Ultimate Trackers been? Or did this video convince you to go with one of these over one of the other tracking types? Let me know down in the comments below, and have a good one.